Let's think about this for a second. You are on a giant rock, hurtling through space. And on this rock is this wild, incredible, and beautiful phenomenon we call life. Today, we're going to dive into the amazing, complex, and sometimes just plain weird science of biology.
I know, it sounds like the setup for a really bad joke, doesn't it? But it's actually the most fundamental question in all of biology. What is it that truly separates you, or a tree, or a cat, from just a plain old rock? The answer is literally what this entire field is about.
So what is life? Well, if you really boil it all down, biology is just a very, very special kind of chemistry. You, me, all of us, we're basically just big, walking, talking bags of molecules that have figured out a few incredible tricks that rocks just haven't. So what exactly are these tricks? Well, let's take a cat. It uses energy from food, it grows up from a kitten, it can make more cats, and it definitely responds if you accidentally step on its tail. A rock, well, it does none of those things. These are the basic rules of the game that separate the living from the non-living.
But underneath all of those rules, there is one single unifying principle. It connects everything from a massive blue whale to the tiniest little bacteria on your phone screen. Unlike rocks, all life that we know of is built from these tiny little units called cells. They are the absolute foundation.
All right, so let's zoom in, like way, way in. If life is built from cells, then what are the cells themselves built from? We're going microscopic now to meet the tiny components that come together to create, well, you. Now, cells come in two main flavors. First, you've got prokaryotes, like bacteria. They're the simple, no-frills model, kind of like a one-room cabin where all the furniture, including the precious DNA, is just floating around. Then you have the eukaryotes. These are the cells that make up you, me, plants, animals, you name it. They're like bustling little cities with all sorts of specialized departments and, crucially, a main office, the nucleus, to keep the all-important DNA safe and sound. And what are these little cellular cities built from? It really boils down to four main molecules. You've got carbohydrates, which are your quick burn fuel. Lipids, which are great for long-term energy storage and for building walls. Proteins, the absolute workhorses that do just about everything. And of course, nucleic acids like DNA, which is the master blueprint for the entire operation. So you've got all these parts all working together in this incredibly delicate balancing act. We call it homeostasis. It's basically your body's internal control system constantly making adjustments to keep things stable. Are you getting too hot? You sweat to cool down. Too cold? You shiver to generate heat. It's this nonstop, 24/7 effort just to keep you alive and running smoothly. So we said DNA is the master blueprint. You know, I think an even better way to imagine it is as a massive, ancient, and incredibly detailed recipe book. It contains every single recipe needed to build and operate you from scratch. And this is a super important point. A single gene isn't a recipe for like your whole eye or your entire hand. No, it's way more specific than that. A gene is a recipe for making one single thing, a protein. And since proteins are the little machines that do almost everything in your body, these recipes are unbelievably important. So how does a cell actually follow one of these recipes? Well, first, inside the nucleus, the library, the original recipe from the DNA book is copied onto a temporary little note card. That's messenger RNA, or mRNA. This little message then leaves the library and travels out into the main workshop to find a ribosome. You can think of the ribosome as the cell's master chef. The chef reads the instructions on the mRNA note card and starts grabbing ingredients, amino acids, and links them together in the exact right order to cook up a brand new protein. Now, here's something that might blow your mind. You have a ton of DNA. In fact, if you took the DNA from just one of your cells and stretched it all the way out, it would be about 2 meters long. So how on earth does all of that information fit inside a microscopic nucleus? Well, it's coiled up, tighter and tighter and tighter, into these incredibly dense little structures we call chromosomes. Now remember, you get one set of chromosomes from each of your parents. That means for most genes, you have 2 copies of the recipe. We call these different versions alleles. Some alleles are dominant, meaning they're the louder instruction. If it's there, it's the one you're going to see. Others are recessive, or quieter. You'll only see that trait pop up if you happen to get 2 copies of that quiet instruction. Let's use eye color as an example. The allele for brown eyes is dominant, and the one for blue eyes is recessive.
So let's say you have two brown-eyed parents, but they both secretly carry that quiet, recessive allele for blue eyes. There's actually a chance they can both pass that quiet gene on to their child. And if we look at the odds, it's pretty fascinating. There's a 75% or 3 in 4 chance that their child will have brown eyes. But there is still that 25% chance, that 1 in 4 shot, that the kid gets 2 copies of the recessive allele and ends up with blue eyes. It's all just a roll of the genetic dice.
Okay, so we've got the blueprints, we've got the building blocks, we've got the whole system, but none of this works without power. So how do living things actually fuel all of these incredible, complex processes?
Everybody, meet ATP. This little molecule is the universal energy currency for all known life. The best way to think about it is like a tiny rechargeable battery. Your cells charge it up with energy from food, and then that little battery floats off to wherever power is needed. When the cell needs to do something, it just breaks one of ATP's chemical bonds, and boom, a burst of energy is released to get the job done.
Right. So where does the energy to charge up all those little ATP batteries come from in the first place? Well, there are really 2 main strategies in the game of life. You've got your autotrophs, like plants. They're the DIY types. They just make their own food using sunlight. And then you have the heterotrophs. That's us. We get our energy the old-fashioned way, by eating other living things.
Okay, so we've seen how the recipe book works when everything goes according to plan. But what happens when there's a typo in the recipe? This is where things get really, really interesting, and it's the key to understanding the incredible diversity of life we see all around us. That typo is called a mutation. It's simply a random change in the sequence of DNA. And I know, the word mutation can sound pretty scary, but the reality is many of them have no effect at all. Some can be harmful, for sure, but every once in a while, a mutation can actually be beneficial.
And those rare beneficial mutations are the fuel for evolution by natural selection. Here's a super simple way to think about it. Imagine a yellow grasshopper has a baby with a random mutation that makes it green. That green color gives it a huge advantage. It blends in with the grass, so birds have a harder time spotting it. So more green grasshoppers survive long enough to have their own babies, and they pass on that helpful green gene. Over many, many generations, the whole population can shift to become green. That's natural selection in a nutshell.
And look, this is not just some story about grasshoppers millions of years ago. This is happening right now, all around us, and even inside our own bodies. A bacteria might have a random mutation that happens to make it immune to an antibiotic. So while all its buddies are wiped out by the medicine, it survives, it reproduces. And pretty soon, you've got a whole new population of superbugs that our medicines can't touch.
And that really brings us to our final thought. The same fundamental processes, the same rules of mutation and adaptation that turned ancient microbes into you and me, they're still running every single day. Bacteria are evolving, viruses are evolving, they're constantly adapting. So the big question we have to ask ourselves is, in this constant evolutionary arms race, are we keeping up?